Welcome everyone. Today I have an amazing Infernalist auto caster build. Now looking behind me, having a look at this particular demonstration. Look at this particular ability ramps up and look at the meteorite. It is kind of bonkers, right? And I do want to warn you guys, if you are sensitive to light and also shock and also animations, the next few parts may be a little extreme, as you're gonna see this build in action inside of the hideout. And also let's come over to the tier 15, tier 14 maps where this build can do this. Yes, some of our viewers has been sharing me with this particular build for the Infernalist, and I finally had time to have a look, and oh boy am I amazed by the creativity of this build. So as you guys can see, the entire map is covered with auto casting meteorite, and our Infernalist friend here is actually auto casting those meteorites. This allows him to mow down the entire map with shockingly amazing meteorites, and he is also auto casting them. And as you can tell, his mana bar or his Infernalist energy bar is always going up and down. And while his life is going up and down together with his energy shield, he's gaining so much life regen that if he doesn't get one-shotted once he's prepared, nothing can kill him pretty much. Now the build does have its interesting mechanics, and just by looking at it, it is very visually pleasing, so keep that in mind. And as you guys can see, sometimes the shockwave's a little too much, but other times it is really amazing. And I'm sure you guys are very excited to see more about this build. So briefly as a summary, as the Infernalist, you can take your Ascension to have your mana replaced with Infernal Flame. So this way, instead of actually spending mana, you're gaining Infernal Flame as you cast spells. And this will in return deal damage to yourself when you overcap those Infernal Flames. And you might be wondering, hey man, isn't that a normal game mechanics? Yes, the developers probably intended for this setup to be that you don't cast too many spells. But our friend over here has discovered a way to continuously spam the spells that cast Infernal Flames, and in return he is dealing damage to himself. But he's stacking a lot of maximum life resistance, a lot of damage recoup as life in so much way that he's dealing damage to himself consistently, but he's recouping even higher life. So the damage he deals to himself will ramp up to become bonus life regeneration, to the point that he's spending energy shield, he's spending life, but he's gaining way more back in the process. And in combination with the ability to gain auto casting when he spins his energy shield, this build is actually super creative and really amazing for the Infernalist should you want to try something that is not a summoner. Yes, one of the reasons I want to play the Infernalist as my Path of Exile 2 starter character is not only for the summons, but the ability to play the Infernalist as a spellcaster. And I have finally found something that resembles something I would imagine to be very powerful for the Infernalist as a spellcaster. Now briefly have a look at this build against any of the tier 14, tier 15 bosses. Now you can notice in comparison to a archers or skeleton snipers build, this build does lack a little bit of single target damage. It is not weak though, a lot of other builds probably can't even do this fast, and he is super sustained. So if we skip a little forward, you can see our friend demonstrating a few of the fights against the boss. It is not the slowest, it is not the fastest, but it is consistent. So here you can see, against another boss, he's already ramping up before the boss gets summoned. And yes, it is very sustainable, and the damage damper is pretty good, especially for the AoE spellcasters. Now before we dive into learning this wonderful build, I would like to give a big thank you and shout out to Imnphil over here, the content creator who actually made this possible. And if you guys want to see similar build and also amazing creativity, I really recommend subscribing to him and also turn the notification on for the latest update. You can see that he has only made a few videos on the Infernalist, and he is already super creative. On the second part, we also have a look at some of his videos, which he demonstrates that you can auto cast any spell with the Infernalist using a similar setup, which also led to me to have some really good future plans and also future planning for this build, which we'll talk about on the third part. Yes, I have prepared a lot of notes to learn about this build because it can be a little complicated, but it is very creative. So coming over to the builder's guide for this build. Now, if you guys want, I do recommend still coming back to Imnphil's explanation video. I have taken a lot of notes and also my own understanding of the build, and I can be a little bit off. I did take the time to learn this build, yes. So now right away with the build, how does it work? I think it's probably easier if we come over to the Ascension because this makes everything happen. So you can see this is the Pragmatic Pack. From the Pragmatic Pack, you'll be converting your maximum mana into maximum Infinite Flame. And over here, he does have defensive capacities, which his damage taking is becoming as fire and also chaos, gaining additional maximum life. And over here, dealing additional critical damage, yes, this is going to be a build that stacks with critical chance and also critical damage. And yes, he will purposely do damage to himself. And as he do damage to himself, what's going to happen is there are a lot of knots that is available, which allows him to recoup damage as life. And this, in combination with the choices of items that also have effects that recoup damage as life, will allow him to gain a lot of life regen. Now, as he loses HP in his build as he casts spells, he can then sacrifice life to gain that much energy shield. And while he is stacking so much life recovery and also damage taking recouped as life, this means that he is constantly gaining a lot of energy shield together with life. The energy shield he gained then can be sacrificed into Barrier Invocation, which allows him to cast a lot of auto-casting spells through the columns and also through the supporting spells. Now during this time, he can also debuff enemies with cold exposure, cast additional spells which will allow him to gain additional castings and also more energy shield gain, having the utility to blink around to gain additional life as he blink around. And finally, his items are built towards having additional maximum life, additional energy shield, and also a huge bonus of maximum life as we're going to go through the video. So coming over to the skill links of this creative build. Now, Emperor First Blade over here is to allow him to cast more spells, which in return combine with other spells, and this is not even socketed. He can be cursing enemies with Hypothermia, together with supporting sockets like Arcane Tempo, Heightened Curse, Mobility, which allows him to move faster, and also Ritualistic Curse. And on the later part, as we go through the notes, there are some important things you need to understand as we come over to the gears. In terms of the Barrier Invocation, he has Conan, which will be his main damaging spell, and this will actually cost a lot of mana. Now here, this is supported by Magnified Effect for additional area of radius, supported by Spell Echo for additional castings, and also Capita and also Impetus, which allows him to increase the maximum energy to summon and also spawn more Conants as he gains tons of energy through losing energy shield, and this auto cast with Barrier Invocation. Now, one of the ways the build consistently gain energy, as we mentioned at the start, is through those pair of gloves. So yes, as he loses life, he can then gain tons of energy shield. And because he's got so much regen on life and energy shield, he can then continuously spam his spells. And as you guys can see in the videos, this is what happens, because the Infernal Flame will keep going up and down. And once the Infernal Flame reaches maximum, you'll get dealt damage towards you as fire damage. But as he loses life, he will then be gaining energy shield and also life, and together he's stacking the damage recouped as life. Over 8 seconds, he's recouping so much life, and that makes him kind of invulnerable with so much regeneration. Now finally, Blink is a utility spell that allows him to have lower cooldowns, additional life regen, and also ability to blink twice. Now at the moment, his reserved spirit is mainly used for Blink, so he's actually spending 60 spirit on the main weapon for Blink. It is possible we'll use this on the secondary weapon, which we'll talk in the future as well about this potential. So as we come over to Imnphil's character sheet and also his choice of items, again, I'll recommend coming back to this video because he actually explained things in quite nicely, and here I'm just taking notes from him as well, so we're learning together. What you can see is he is stacking maximum fire resistance around 83%. Now, this is the good time. Let's come over to the notes that I have learned. So there are a lot of key points you need to understand for this build. The first thing is he has recommended to be at least at level 80 before you try the build, because you need a lot of skill points which recoup life, which recoup damage as life. The build itself costs around 100 to 300 Exalt, depending on inflation. And here what I have done is I have searched the crucial gears potentially for the build, and some of those gears will cost 1 Exalt, some of those gears will cost about 1 Divine. And this, in addition with the rare items, might cost you around 100 to 300 Exalt, so keep that in mind. The build also wants at least 3400 life, otherwise you'll feel squishy, you'll die too fast before your healing ramps up. The build also wants a lot of energy shield, which can be very expensive. Now, as we come over to the gears, what we're going to see is let's go over each of them briefly, and I'll try to highlight the most important gears of choice, or the most important affix of choice. For the one-handed wand, he's going with +5 to cold spells, because he's casting a cold spell, together with additional casting speed, additional intelligence, and additional cold damage, and even some additional maximum mana. Now, as we keep going, what you're going to see is the build itself will try to stack energy shield. And together with stacking maximum life, you can see over here with a huge maximum life, additional resistance, additional critical hit chance, and also socketing gems that provides him with either maximum life or maximum fire resistance. Now, as we come over to this unique shield, this is one of the costly piece for the build, and this shield is actually pretty interesting. If you look at the shield, it doesn't have any stats, but you will boost the stats of the actual sockets of the items in this particular shield. You can corrupt this shield to 2 sockets, and in my trade filters, if you want to try the build, I have the filters ready for you guys. You definitely want at least 2 sockets, and then you want something that has a greater roll over here. Notice it becomes much more expensive if you go for that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the divine, probably make it a little cheaper. Let's set to 3 divine. So if I set to 3 divine and you select this, you can see around 2 divine and maybe 3 divine, you're aiming to get at least 500% or 600% increase in effect of the socket of the soul cost. So what does this do? If you socket the 2% maximum life gems, 2 of those, you'll be getting over 24% maximum life. Yes, this is a massive boost to life, and because the build wants so much life, this is one of the best in slot items for the build once you get a massive roll together with 2 sockets. You do not want a shield with only 1 socket. Now, Imnphil has mentioned that you can use this particular shield, which is his previous shield, that provide him with a lot of viruses and also his socketing for maximum life. So if you guys cannot afford the maximum life shield, you can go with this one, which can be a little cheaper. But of course, the best in slot shield is definitely that one. Now, in terms of his other pieces of gears, you can see that he's going with maximum elemental resistance, so he can push his fire resistance close to 83%. You don't want to go too high. And let's come over to the notes about this particular part. So over here, maximum fire resistance should be between 80 to 85%. Now, Imnphil said about this in the video because if you get too much maximum fire resistance, you'll be not taking enough damage to auto-cast your spells. At the same time, if you have too low maximum fire resistance, you will start to die a lot. So the sweet point is between 80 to 85%, and this will depend on your build and also how fast you're clicking the buttons. So as you guys can see over here, the chest has a lot of maximum life, additional spirit, which allows him to cast blink, additional resistance, and also additional intelligence, which is stacking a lot for this build. Now as we keep going, you can see his amulet is actually focused on gaining additional recoup health through taking damage. So 28% damage taking recoup as life. This is one of the major effects he wants on amulet, together with additional maximum life, additional all stats, additional spell damage will be helpful, but the most important focus is to recoup damage as life. This is what he's stacking for the build. Now over here I do want to mention the anointed enchantment on the amulet over here will help you to gain additional life recovery. It is one of the cheaper anointment over here, and here Imnphil does show us over here, it is a 15% increased life recovery, which he mentioned to be a rather cheap enchantment. And as we're going to go further, you can see the rings are here for additional resistance, additional life, and also additional elemental resistance together with chaos resistance. Now in terms of the boots, we have additional movement speed, additional maximum life, any additional resistance together with socketing for additional maximum life gems. And coming back to the rings, you can see additional maximum life, all stats, additional resistance, wherever you can find them. So the rear gears are not going to be the most expensive. The most expensive one is probably getting a right shield. And here we can see in terms of the build, we have additional maximum life, additional strength, additional resistance. And those will help him to cap his resistance at least 75%. And finally, for the gloves, of course, he has corrupted the gloves for additional 2 sockets. And you can see that he has socket for additional maximum fire resistance. Now remember earlier, he's trying to balance fire resistance between 85 to 80%. And his current resistance is 83% with close to 4000 HP. And that is the sweet point to gain enough damage dealt to himself and then dealing enough damage auto-casting. Now briefly going over the skill trees of this build, you can see that over here we're taking as much damage recoup as life everywhere we can with maximum life. So all the points over here we try to recoup life, and this will allow you to become more survivable together with auto casting some spells, additional spell critical chance and also critical hits, and again damage recoup as life. He did path over here for additional damage recoup as life, and also over here for the maximum resistance. Together with over here with additional critical chance, more strength, it means more life for the build, and this allows him to deal even higher damage. Now, before we jump over to the additional tips and so skill rotation for the build, let's come over back to my notes. Yes, I have taken a lot of notes to learn the build. And over here, Imnphil does mention that you want to control your mana cost. And as you control your mana cost, some of the spells like the supported gem like Focus Curse and also Impending Doom can amplify the cost of your spells. Because you want to have a consistent cost of spells, this allows you to continuously to be casting and also stacking the maximum damage you can deal to yourself and while sustaining yourself. Now the goal of the build is to deal consistent damage to yourself. You don't want to overdo it, you don't want to underdo it. And this means you'll be recouping as much damage as life over the 8 seconds because of everything you have picked with amulets and also passives, and this means we have crazy healing after 1 to 2 seconds of starting up the build. So briefly having a look at the skill rotations for this build, you can see that once he starts casting his curses and also he can cast his Elbow First Blade, then the abilities will start triggering as he casts multiple spells. The quicker he spams his spells, which there's only 2 of them, the more auto casting there will be. And after 1 to 2 seconds of ramp up, his health recovery is so high, then he can become this unkillable AoE machine. And you can see this demonstrated in the tier 14 and also tier 15 maps. Now again, I do want to remind you guys, Imnphil has revealed that he did die a few times in double corrupted tier 15 maps, and he is having a little trouble with tier 16 maps. So even though the build looks amazing, those are tested around tier 14 and tier 15 I believe, and I do recommend coming back to his video, which he does disclose the positives and also negatives as he demonstrates more of the build with you guys. And of course guys, should you want to see more of his gameplays, I won't be revealing too much, so this is a little teaser. Make sure you come over to his videos as you can see the full gameplays of the build in action. So now coming over to the second part of the build, I do want to do this for the build that we learn in the future, because you guys might be asking me, hey Matt, do we want to switch from the skeleton snipers to this build, and why do we want to swap to this build, and how good is this build for the future? So let's have a look at the first part. This is when let's review the disadvantage and also advantage of the build. As you guys can see in the gameplays, this is an amazing concept and also application of auto casting build, which is very smooth. It looks amazing as it goes across the map and everything melts within seconds. He's got blink, he's got life regen. Well, he seems to have everything, and those are some really good positives. It has potential for group mapping, which you can play with 4 players with a lot of monster density, and you just mow down the monsters without a worry in the world. But what is the concern for the build is that right now, we're not sure how much it will scale in the endgame. After tier 15, there's tier 16 double modifiers, tier 17, tier 18, even tier 19 difficulty maps. So the build might have a concerning factor with scaling in the endgame because it's even harder to get high HP as it go further right, the cost of those will go up. The second thing he mentioned is that yes, he did die a few times in tier 15 maps, and that is because it's double corrupted. And finally, the single target damage is not the weakest, but you do have to kind of stay around about. And the single target damage compared to a sniper build seems to be a little weaker. Of course, our sniper build is main and max for boss damage and also killing Uber and also pinnacle bosses if you haven't seen the previous video. So what I want to do here is I want to share this build not only to show you guys how great the build is and also to support our fellow Infernalist creators who is doing a ton of good work, and I really want to give him the good shout out and also the recognition he deserves. And you guys should subscribe to him, help him to build the channel and also help him to be motivated to make the build even better. So what I want to do is I want to not only give credits to him, I want us as a community to try to help to make the build better. And I have come up with a few testings myself, even though I don't have the goal to change into the build. Here are some of my ideas, which you can have a look, and maybe you can give me feedbacks through direct message on Discord, and we as a community can try to make the build better. So the first thing I recognize and notice is I notice the socketing of the jewels. You can socket +1 maximum fire resistance. On the same time, you can also socket in the +2% maximum life. So your choice is either 1% maximum fire or 2% maximum life. But how do we solve this question? Well, let's come over to my character, and I do have an item which will help you guys to understand how we can make the build better. This particular jewel, I actually bought it much earlier, this is probably more expensive now, will give us maximum fire and also maximum chaos. There are other potential jewels over here that can give us maximum life 1%. or this can give us maximum fire 1%. Now, it is perfect if we can get both maximum fire and also maximum life for the build. That will be amazing, but it's hard to get. Even this one is probably a few divine now. So how this works is, look at this knot, it doesn't have anything, right? I put this in, all of a sudden every big knot in the area will provide me with 1 maximum fire and also 1 maximum chaos resist. Yes, I'm trying to build a build for you guys that has over 80 maximum fire and also chaos resist. So for the build we're learning at the moment, what we can do is we can consider socketing some of the items. We can consider removing some of the sockets in terms of the fire resist because we only get 2% here. We can get somewhere like 4% just because of those, and the additional socket we free up, we can then socket into additional maximum life. This seems to be the better trade-off, and this way he can take advantage of these kind of particular jewels that will give him the maximum life he needed. He doesn't need this over 85%, so any spare additional socket he has, then he can be going with maximum life. Now my second recommendation or suggestion is to let us have a look at the demon form. I'm not sure how well the demon form will go with the build, but one of the plus side of the demon form actually is +6. If you go to the demon form, you have +6 to all your spells. And this can be potentially very powerful, especially you will get 10% additional powers with the demon form. So this amplifies to 160 increased spell damage per demon flame because you can get 10 demon flames. So +6 to all skills, all spells, plus 160% to spell damage. And this means that this is actually a potential to become a spellcaster if we go into demon form and use the same combo. Now as we keep going with some of my theory crafted recommendations, what about the skills that procs with faster attack triggers? So here I have actually theory crafted, what if you use Dark Effigy? What if you have ways to deal additional chaos damage over time, and this one can be a machine gun. You deal so much chaos damage over time, and this particular totem will become your main damage machine gun as you auto spam those spells. And as we keep going, what about lightning spells? What if you use Archmage with maximum mana to scale with additional lightning spell damage? What if we just become an aura bot? We just auto cast every curse, we auto disable enemies, and instead of trying to do damage, what if you're in a team that you're just here to freeze, to shock, to disable enemies while cover the entire map and auto casting everything? And finally, of course, the potential to use a second weapon set skill can be great for this build, because as you guys know, this build also uses Blink, which is actually taking up 60 spirit, which can be running another aura. This build also uses curses. If you guys remember our previous build and also setup, we have the second set of weapon abilities, which allows you to have stronger curses, bigger curse radius, and also better curse debuffs. So this can somewhat greatly enhance the build in terms of performance in the late game to help it survive in tier 16 and also go beyond. So hopefully you guys enjoy learning this build together with me. And again, a big shout out and also thank you to Imnphil for sharing this build and also continuously updating this build. I'll have the builder's guide available and also the links to his channel, so make sure you follow him for the latest update. And I do want to hear from you guys. What do you think about my recommendations and how would this build work? I'll try to contact Imnphil as well to see if we can make the build better and also make the possibility of a spellcasting Infernalist for you guys so that if the skeleton gets nerfed, we have a backup. And that's pretty cool, right? You're playing one class, one ascendancy to have two variations that is entirely different build and that plays entirely different playstyles, and you don't have to level another class again. And this means we can be a mage or a summoner in the future. Now before we finish, if you guys haven't subscribed, this is a really good time to do so because I'll be looking into the latest Path of Exile 2 news on different communities and also on our official forum, official webpage. I'll also be looking into the best build for each of the class as the meta develops with the Chinese and also the English community. So stay tuned for the latest update and also guides for Path of Exile 2. And of course, this is gonna be a big month for us. And I'll try to bring you guys all of the latest content and also guides for Path of Exile 2 to come.